Hello everyone, AmyR here with Prairie Paper and Ink, and I am back with more Christmas cards. So for today's cards, I started off with a full sheet of Simon's 120 pound white cardstock, and I'm just cutting it in half once and then cutting it in half again. So I have 4 pieces that are 4 1/4 by 5 1/2. The size is somewhat irrelevant because I will cut this down to a little bit smaller, but by cutting a piece of cardstock, an 8 1/2 by 11 piece of cardstock, you basically get 4 card fronts. So after I'd cut it down, I pulled out my Wendy Vecchi station here. This is becoming my go-to for use with stencils because I can just use the magnets and I don't have to tape anything down. And especially for this because I'm going to be using 4 different stencils and rotating them out. And I'm using the Winter Floral Layering Stencil set from Simon. So it has all 4 layers so that you can easily use different colors to create essentially like pattern paper in a sense, or, you know, a card background, whatever. There's also a stencil Simon released at the same time with like just one stencil with all of it, which, you know, has its options as well. I might use that in a future video. My brain's starting to go. Anyway, for the first layer, I chose to use the like the pine needle sort of layer, and I'm using Simon's Laurel green ink. And for all my blending, I'm using like my Picket Fence life-changing blender brushes. And if needed, I clean it but with a microfiber cloth. I don't wash my brushes hardly ever. I just wipe them on a microfiber cloth until no more ink comes off and it's good to go. I will say now that I've done this, I would recommend using the floral stencil in the set first. It's easier to line everything up around the flowers than it is this way. It still wasn't difficult per se, but I just, after I was done, I was like, it would have been just even faster to do the flowers first and then you center the everything else just around them. But for the leaf stencil, I used 2 different shades of green. I used green apple first, which is the lighter green. And then I just added a bit of green leaf ink with a smaller blender brush just to those little leaves that are like the little leaf, like cluster, I guess you want to call it. Again, it just gives it that little extra something. Nothing major, but you know, just something. And I just kept doing this process over and over again. So I'd use the first stencil, do all 4 pieces of cardstock, and then bring in the second stencil and do all 4 pieces of cardstock and just keep repeating this process. So like I've mentioned with other cards, you could do many more than this. If this was like your main sort of a thing, you could do a whole bunch of these, you know, sort of in one sitting, which is really, really nice. I only did 4 because obviously I do all these videos and everything else, but this is one of those ones where I would enjoy like kind of mass producing a whole bunch of them for, you know, my main Christmas card because it ends up looking so pretty and it's just, the process is fun. So anywho, after I did the greenery, this is where I bring in the floral stencil of the set and get this lined up. And for this one, I'm going to use Simon's Lipstick Red ink. So I blend that on first, and then I'm actually going to bring in some dark chocolate ink using the small blender brush I'd use with the greens, which I clean off the small blender brush, but when you're going from like a green to a really, really dark brown, I don't think it really matters, but it's habit. But with that one, I'm using the small brush because I'm only blending from the very center of the flowers. It just deepens the red. So it gives it just that extra little bit of definition and only takes a couple seconds. So I keep, again, repeating this process. So just move the stencil onto the second piece of cardstock, blend on the lipstick red. Once I'm happy with that, I go in and add that bit of the chocolate brown to the centers. And it just deepens up that red and gives it that little extra something. So once I finish this process, I'm going to go on and do the last layer of stencil, which is the little dots that are technically like the flower centers and whatnot. So I did clean off my mat before going on to this one because I'm using a yellow shade and I didn't want it picking up all that red just on accident or anything like that. So I lined that stencil up and I'm using Sunshine ink for these. Although again, after it's done, I'm editing, I was like, ooh, this is the stencil where I would use like glitter paste, like a gold glitter paste would look gorgeous. Any glitter paste really, like a glitter paste would look really, really nice for this step. You would just have to obviously make the point of like setting each cover on a side to let it dry. And it wouldn't take that long though because they're little dots. They're not like a ton. But anyway, hindsight as always. So I just blended on the yellow ink onto all of these. So it does the centers, but it also adds little dots kind of in the background, which of course I love. It's not enough for me though, because I'm going to add a whole bunch of splatter too, because I can't resist adding the splatter. So after I finished my blending on all of the backgrounds, I brought out my splat box. For the first bit of splatter, I'm using ground espresso oxide spray. So I'm shaking it side to side really well to mix that pigment with the liquid. And then I take the nozzle right out of the bottle and I flick it with my finger. And this is where you would want to protect your hands. I ended up with like a bunch of ground espresso like under my fingernails. Like my fingernail looks disgusting. Like, not gonna lie. It's gross. I don't really care, but just looking at it, I was like, if anyone sees that just looks really gross. So yeah, if you want to wear a glove, or, you know, you can also apply after mixing up the oxide spray, like apply it to an acrylic block like I've shown in videos, and like splatter it with a paintbrush just to save your hands. You know, it works, but again, just random little tidbit. But yeah, I splattered that, and I chose the oxide spray because it's actually going to lighten, because it's also going to oxidize with the next spray I use, but also because these dry really quickly. Because I wanted this dry. I could have done a white splatter, but that would have taken a lot longer to dry. And, you know, sometimes you just don't have the time for that. So I did the oxide splatter on all 4 backgrounds, and then it's dry at this point. And then I pulled out, this is Imagine Crafts Sheer Shimmer Craft Spray. This is the gold. There's also a sparkle that I've used in previous videos that's just beautiful. It's more of a like silver iridescent sparkle. This one is obviously a gold sparkle, and it's really, really fine, and it's just gorgeous. So I, you know, shook up the sparkle really, really well, and then I sprayed this on all of these backgrounds in the splat box, holding the bottle fairly high up, like, you know, over a foot high, you know, from the backgrounds, and just sprayed it. And I will show at the end with a flashlight, because it's one of those things where when you look at it straight on, it almost doesn't look like there's anything there, and then you tilt it in the light and you see that shimmer and sparkle. It's gorgeous. Love. Anyway, set all those aside to dry. Then I worked on my sentiments. And for the sentiments, I used the Joyful Frame wafer die. I die cut the like backing piece from VELLUM. And the actual sentiment I die cut from Tonic's Gold Pearl Mirror Satin card, which is one of my go-tos. There's something, the shade of gold and just the satin finish. So it's not super reflective. I just think it's gorgeous. So I adhered the little frame piece to the VELLUM with my multimedia matte adhesive. I have a little fine tip applicator, and I'll have a link to all that with the supplies. But for some of these where I'm doing such little kind of finicky detail parts, this is where this adhesive really comes in. So I adhered the frame first, and then I applied adhesive to just the letters, and then I'm pressing the entire piece onto my background. I'm not going to let this completely dry because I don't want the entire background to get adhered as well, just in case any adhesive did ooze. So I'm actually just using the pin from the applicator bottle to pop out the center of the O, and then to also kind of help me roll up, is basically what I'm doing, is rolling up the center portion of the sentiment and then pressing down the letters just to keep them in place. So it really wasn't that difficult. It's just a little bit finicky, but for me, I was like, the result was worth it to have it adhered, you know, centered properly, because I didn't want to sit and fiddle with all those letters, you know, just adhering them all each individually and trying to center them. Doing it this way keeps them all centered. It was done. So I pressed them down really good after I'd removed that backing piece. And then I had repeated that process 3 more times. So I had them for all the cards. And then for the insides of my cards, I have all my card bases, and I'm going to line them up in my Misty, and I'm going to stamp a sentiment from the Inside Christmas Greetings stamp set. I actually didn't use the holiday mix one that I've used in almost every single video. I chose a different set this time. So I'm just stamping, I'm keeping the inside simple, and I'm just stamping that sentiment from the set with that same lipstick red dye ink. And then while I have my Misty out, I'm also going to stamp the envelopes. There was a sentiment in that set that was like perfect for the envelopes, because it says, what does it say? It says holiday cheer enclosed. So obviously it's perfect for the envelope. So I would line up each of the envelopes open so I can just stamp just the flap with that sentiment. And I'm stamping the sentiments with dark chocolate ink onto the red envelope, and just repeating the process, opening the envelope and then lining it up in the Misty, stamping the sentiment so that all my envelopes are stamped with that cute little sentiment, because I just thought, you know, it just kind of finishes it all off. So after I finish stamping the sentiments on the envelopes, I just need to start adhering everything to my card fronts and then the cards to the actual bases. So to adhere these die cut sentiments, all I'm going to do is apply a thin line of that same multimedia matte adhesive just behind the frame portion. I'm not going to bother putting adhesive behind all those letters. That takes too long and it's unnecessary. The sentiments are really lightweight because it's literally just vellum and a little bit of that satin cardstock. So they don't need a ton of glue, and I'm adhering them directly to the background, like simple. So all I do is apply that thin line of the multimedia matte, center it as best I can onto my card front. And then I did put some acrylic blocks on top, although I think I was kind of being redundant again because this adhered really well. Like the background is flat, you know, the sentiments are flat. There's not a whole lot going on, but rather be safe than sorry. So I adhered all of that. And then to adhere the actual card fronts to the card bases, I'm just going to use craft tacky glue for that because I don't like using multimedia matte for large areas. I keep the multimedia matte just for any like detail work, basically, is how I prefer to use that. And then for anything larger, like card fronts and, you know, most of my adhering needs, as well as like embellishments and that, I just prefer craft tacky glue. So I adhered all the card fronts to the card bases, and then I added a little bit more bling because the last couple videos I haven't been using as much bling and I need to get my fix. So I've got Studio Caudia, I have gold foil pearls, I have Peridot crystals and July crystals, which are the red ones. So I'm just kind of sprinkling these throughout these card fronts, being a little bit more heavy-handed with them just because they're pretty and it just ties everything together with the colors. So once I'm kind of happy with the placement of everything, I just pick them up with my little jewel picker, put down a dab of the craft tacky adhesive, and then press them into place. And then I just need to let them dry and then they're good to go. And then of course adding a few more here and there because like I said, I needed my fix. So that finished off these cards. I'm going to turn the flashlight on my phone and try and show you guys just that gold shimmer. It's, like I said, it's subtle and yet it's really pretty. Just really pretty. So as always, I will have a link below the video to my blog post. I'll have a supply list with links to everything I used in the description box below the video, as well as on my blog. So you can check that out below if you are interested. Thank you all so much for watching and subscribing and thumbs upping and commenting. I really appreciate it. And I will see you all very soon in the next video. Bye.